Hello, I'm the State Soil Health Coordinator for the Oklahoma Conservation Commission. My name is Amy Seeger, and I have been working with the Commission for 3.5 years. In that time, we have realized that there's a need and an opportunity to gather soil health data on land, not only for the landowners to see the improvements on their land, but also so we can correlate it back to our water quality data. And you'll see today when I go through this process and what data we're collecting, how it can be impactful to look at water quality and the soil health itself together. We work in partnership with our conservation districts and NRCS offices across the state. We also have several private partners that work with us, and we all work together to distribute education and resources to landowners, to municipalities, and those that have vested interest in water quality along with land improvement. We know that through these partnerships that we can provide an unlimited amount of resources and valuable resources back to landowners. We can also utilize this information for improving what we're doing as a state agency within our division for cost share programs, for conservation itself on the land. And so the more we work together, the better it works for our state and for the landowners themselves. So we're pretty proud of this partnership and work really hard to continue those processes and relationships throughout the state itself. And we have also branched into other states. We've worked with Kansas as well, and we'll continue to develop those partnerships. So how does soil health reflect on water quality? You've seen through previous presentations that we have landowners that are changing the soil on their land to impact our water quality. The first thing that we see is actually water infiltration increasing as we improve our soil health. That's probably one of the first things we see. But there's many other processes and developments within the soil that change throughout time as our soil health principles are being practiced on land. So our goal with W.O.R.M.S, working on regenerative management systems, that's our ESRI 123 data collection point system, was actually based off an NRCS soil health card. Our state soil health team worked together to develop a way to measure quality of soil through the 5 principles of soil health that we look at, which is keep it covered, using diversity on the land, a living root at all times, minimal disturbance, and also incorporating livestock where we can. These 5 principles can be measured in the field and are valuable for landowners to see what's happening as they adopt these practices. And we're trying to utilize now taking the soil health card and making it a digital version. Before, the soil health card really just looked at cropland and utilizing those 5 principles. We've adapted it to be more than just cropland, but it's still all the same 5 principles. It's just measuring in the field differently. So before the NRCS card, we had our NRCS staff that would go out onto the field with our producers, and they would take measurements, write it in the card, give them a ranking system, and the card would get either filed away into their folder and they could review it for next year, or the producer would take it home with them and may get tossed in the back seat, maybe looked at again next year, maybe not. And so trying to update into a digital system and also a quantitative instead of a ranking system, I felt was crucial for us to have quality information that can be utilized for everybody. So we've implemented this now into an ESRI 123 survey. This is a look at the soil health card itself. It is what some of our NRCS staff still use with our producers, and we highly encourage. It gives them another set of points to look at and a different way to look at the same thing that we collect. They have incorporated a few things that we do not incorporate, and we've incorporated a few things that aren't included in this. So I work directly with our NRCS staff and our soil health team with a committee to develop what we felt was strong for the WORMS data collection. Again, WORMS means working on regenerative management systems. So even though the NRCS card is utilizing looking at worms, information that's left in the soil, actually seeing worms and counting them, our WORMS is not incorporating that, or will not incorporate that into our data. It is important for the soil development, but I tried to pull the most crucial things that were impactful for landowners. Yes, WORMS is definitely impactful and crucial for them, but we felt water infiltration, the structure of the soil, and then also doing a soil health test that can be done. It's called a Haney Test. Captured just as much information that we needed without gathering some of the other information that the NRCS card gathered. So here you can see it all written out, WORMS, working on regenerative management systems. We also were developing this so that we have a very large Blue Thumb program within our water quality division, and the soil health team, where I'm stationed out of with the Oklahoma Conservation Commission, is also underneath the water quality team. And we tried to mimic a citizen scientist volunteer program so that they could go out and actually utilize this on their site, on their land, whether small or big, and adapt these processes. It also helped us to bridge a gap between our urban landowners and our rural landowners. I think there's some misunderstanding sometimes, or a lack of understanding between where our food sources come from and how the land is managed. So we felt like this was a great opportunity to bridge some gaps and give them a viewpoint of how much our farmers are really trying to protect our resources around us. So this was also a great opportunity to kind of fine-tune our data collection to make sure that it was useful, it was easy to be completed, and once they had a training, could do it on their own. And it will be a year long, every year, just once a year, take a sample in a site that you're trying to change. You can see in the picture that this was a pollinator site in the middle of a city. So right at the front you can see the different flowers, the different plant vegetation, and then in the back there's a Bermuda grass lawn. And we really tried to show during our test run with these volunteers the difference, especially in the soil health itself, from one site to the next. And I'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute. But again, the water infiltration, I will say, is one of our largest impactful factors to actually reach our public. So, and you can see our NRCS staff, they're helping them along the way while they're collecting information. So some of the information we have on here, I didn't list them all. I do have a link and I can share that to our site. I would just ask that please don't enter any information into it unless you've been trained. And I would be glad to go through a training with anybody that's interested, or even just to discuss what we're doing and how we're collecting it. So we definitely take the date, who's collecting it, the temperature, the weather, because that can be impactful. We just recently came through kind of a rainy spell of when we would normally take soil health readings, and we were concerned about our water infiltration being impacted by that. So we still did our measurements, but took notes that it had rained and how much it had rained prior to our arrival. So, and then land management, we now have everything that NRCS delineates for land management. So we have urban land or lawnscapes, cropland, pasture land, which is like introduced species, Bermuda grass, fescue. They're usually monocultures. We're trying to adapt different changes for those. Rangeland, which is our native prairie sites, and then forest. So forest is our most current and has not quite as much information gathered on it as our other ones, but we're looking forward to expanding that as well. And then we take our water infiltration, and we also collect soil tests or soil samples for a soil test. I recommend, if no one's familiar with it, to look up the Haney Test. It's a different perspective for nutrient management and actually utilizing what nutrients are available to plants instead of just NP and K. So it gives us inorganic and organic nitrogen, and also many micronutrients that are available to the plants as well. So we really liked using that test in conjunction with our field data collection as well. So we have some of our chemical with our physical. So this is what it looks like once you get to W.O.R.M.S. We're now on W.O.R.M.S version 3. And so this link below is, we just updated it. So it is not the correct one. I will send the correct one so that you all may go in and look at it. But it's very similar. The only difference was that we had to add in our forest. So we'll get that updated and shared with you. It has all of our information so we can get back in touch with you. It also has down at the bottom options for photographs. So I have a process that I've put into place. We try to get a whole shovel full of at least 8 inches of profile so that we can look at the structure. If I have somebody that's a citizen scientist and I'm not sure that they're familiar with structure or what we're looking at, I can at least go in and do a quality check on that through the photograph. Also, we have some visuals that I recommend having pictures for, and so biomass, things like that I can see in a picture very easily, and ways to take the photographs for that. So again, we have a training that we've set up so that people are being consistent with their data collection. This is the Haney test that I talked about. This is reflective of 2 different sites. Crown Heights, you can see on the right, is where our volunteer training occurred, and it was a pollinator plot. And then the other one on the left is just a site that was actually next to a building and had heavy clay content in the soil and just leftover construction matter basically, and we were converting it to a pollinator plot. So we wanted to see changes that occurred on those sites after implementing some of the practices that we encourage our landowners to use. So this was our very first map. We now have up to 60 dots on our map. I left it with these 2 just because it made it a little bit more simple, and I'll get into why in just a minute. But as we go in, there's a GPS coordinate system built into the app itself, and this can be used on your phone. We also have paper documents that I have people record information on if they're not comfortable using their phone, and can go back and submit it at the desktop. We just have to make sure that they record their GPS coordinates accordingly so that the dots will show up in the correct location. So there are 2 sites down at the bottom. You'll see Stillwater up at the top center, and then kind of in the south central region of Oklahoma. You can't see the 2 dots, but there are 2 dots in that site location. And it was very interesting. These were my first 2 pilot points to test out our field data and our app together to see if we could actually record the information, it be accurate, And then, was there something we could learn from it? And it was pretty neat, because the first time through we did learn a few things that made it even more impactful for us to continue this process. So as you can see, when you hover over the dots, it'll come up with all the information that we put into the system. And this is just a small snippet of those. Um, and you can see in there what they're planting, what type of system it is, what kind of soil type it is. And the biggest thing for me on this point was, if we're trying to impact producers across the state, if we could visually give them a couple of years worth of data from one producer that's implementing these practices, and it's making a huge impact on his well-being, the farmer's well-being, his business, then they can say, oh, they can do that here. We get a lot of, well, it works for him, but it's not going to work for me. Or it'll work for her, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted to kind of soften that discussion by actually giving more points throughout the whole state of where people are practicing these things. In every ecoregion, we have 12 different ecoregions across Oklahoma with hundreds of thousands of different soil types. And so if we could start narrowing down that it isn't going to work for me, then that gives us one less excuse to be able to share with the producers. So these are our two sites that I gathered in southwestern Oklahoma. And the really amazing thing to me, and this wasn't even but going in on one day and collecting the information, he had a site that was in a wheat rotation that was using cover crops, and two different places that we went to that was the same producer. However, one site had been in cover crops for 4 years. The other site had been conventionally farmed, and he just gained it for leasing purposes. And so we wanted to compare the two sites to see if there was any difference between the two, and they were exact same soil types. So it was a perfect opportunity for us to see if this was going to be data worth collecting without spending too much time from one year to the next of collecting information that might have been useless. So the biggest thing, and then what I've said from the beginning that we saw, was water infiltration. And so his first field, where he had been doing cover crops in a wheat rotation for 4 years, his water infiltration for that soil was an inch every 7 minutes. And for Oklahoma, that is crucial. We have to have a short time span to capture water, because we get quick rainfalls all of a sudden, and we can have an inch in less than an hour. And so if we're not capturing that water, it's running into our streams, and so the faster we can get it in, the better it is. So his first site, we got an inch in less than 7 minutes. And then we went to the second site where he just started leasing. The producer still had wheat in the field. He had not started implementing his practices into it, and that inch took over 20 minutes to go into the soil. And again, it was the exact same soil type, but two different management perspectives, and it cut the water infiltration in half. And that is our biggest selling point for these producers, is especially our southwestern region, our western side of Oklahoma being more dry. They need to capture the water that they gather. And so changing that infiltration rate is our first step of getting that completed. We also see huge changes in organic matter across as those processes are occurring. And for a producer, relating that back to, okay, you've captured water, now you need to hold on to it. And if he has the right amount of organic matter and a cover, then we're not losing it to evaporation, and we're holding it there for the crop itself. So water has been a huge selling point on why we want to use these practices. So We, again, like I said before, we're expanding into urban and rural education. Um, if you look to your left, there's a typical spring lawn that hasn't been sprayed with pre-emergence. And then you look at the bottom and that's been sprayed with pre-emergence because there's no green life to it. If we have green life growing, then we have microbes that are working in the soil. They're creating that organic matter. They're creating those micropore spaces for water to be captured and allowing Earth's natural water cycle to occur. Our biggest thing is we have cut the soil part out of our water cycle. The infiltration has changed due to mechanical changes that have occurred across landscapes. We no longer have as many prairies as we used to. We're going in and incorporating more urban, small housing additions. Um, these all impact the water infiltration. So the little space that we do have, we want to make sure it's green at all times. So we encourage cool season plantings within our Bermuda grass, allowing our clover and our dandelions to grow. Those dandelions have wonderful tap roots that are great rain barrels whenever they die away for water to be held. So it doesn't matter what kind of land you own, you can still incorporate our soil health principles. And this was just a thing that we put together to reach our urban guys as well. And we did a quick demonstration during a 1-inch rain event in Oklahoma lawn. We'll receive the average Oklahoma lawn for a cityscape receives about 5,000 gallons of water, and we may be lucky if 4,000 go down the storm drain. It could be even more or closer to the 5,000, depending on how that lawn is treated. And then our little citizen scientists, if we empower them, they only know what they know. And so if we empower them, they'll share the word. And this is my contact information, and you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll help as much as I can. And again, I'll send out the new link to our W.O.R.M.S survey, and make sure everybody has access to that so they can see how it works. Thank you. I hope y'all have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the presentations.